SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by the Canadian Gaming Summit, bringing you Canada's premier annual conference and exhibition for gaming and sports betting senior executives from across Canada and beyond.
SBC Summit Barcelona is where you can experience the entire global industry coverage under one roof. Join 10,000 industry professionals for 3 days of game-changing conversation and education. Get your tickets now at sbcevents.com.
This week witnessed betting operator Sky Bet secure 5 more years of title partnership with the English Football League. Under the new deal, Sky Bet will continue its previous 10-year commitment until at least the 2028-29 season, during which time the sports betting firm will contribute 50% more to the EFL overall development. More details around the contract revealed that Sky Bet will also secure £6 million for a community fund held by the EFL to allocate to local communities across England and Wales. There is also a new memorandum of understanding being drafted between the entities revolving around safer gambling and social responsibility. And this will be the discussion on today's iGaming Daily, sponsored by SBC Summit Barcelona, where I'm joined by 2 brilliant guests who I'll allow to introduce themselves so the listener can hear who's who. So, Joe, do you want to start off?
Yeah, thanks ever so much, James. And it's great to be back on the podcast. A really interesting sponsorship deal and sponsorship landscape to discuss today.
Yeah, George, sponsorship director for our SBC sponsorship division. Great to be back on as well.
Oh, it's great to have you both back on, and 2 perfectly placed candidates, I'd say, for this discussion. So, firstly, how significant is the deal with not only Sky Bet, but also the extension with Sky Sports? And were there any other candidates in the running to be the EFL's key partner? Joe, I'll go to you on this one.
Yeah, well, I think the story of the extension, if you like, very much commenced with the speculation around the broadcasting rights. And there were plenty of sharks in the water circling on that front to be the EFL's broadcasting partner. We had DAZN, we had Viaplay, we had BT Sport, all in there. And understandably, there's so much content with the EFL. However, the EFL steered that ship back towards Sky Sports, and that's where they always wanted to go. And that's understandable because it's not just being on Sky Sports Football or Sky Sports Main Event or whatever they're on. It's the whole promotional machine that comes with Sky Sports News, Sky Sports YouTube, the Sky Sports News websites, platforms. It really makes these events a behemoth. If you look at the playoffs as an example, they're obviously massive anyway, but with this weight of Sky Sports and the Sky Sports promotional campaign behind them, it becomes such a bigger event. And when the EFL did steer that ship back towards Sky Sports as the broadcasting partner, the extension with Sky Bet, even amidst a slightly different climate for betting partnerships, it felt like a natural fit, and it felt like it was inevitable, especially as how the Sky Bet EFL collaboration has really thrived as well.
George, what's your thoughts on it?
I think Joe's given a really strong answer, to be completely fair. He's absolutely smashed that answer. I think just to add to that, in terms of its significance, absolutely right. The benefit of working with Sky Sports is absolutely huge, and Joe gave a really strong answer there as to why that was the case. I think the other piece to look at is the revenue uplift that was secured, and the significance that has that has both for the Sky Sports deal, but then also the Sky Bet deal, which we'll talk about a little bit more. In terms of were there any others in the running, Joe's already given a bit of an overview for the process that would have taken place for the broadcast agreement. Certainly for the sponsorship, I think the EFL and Sky Bet will have known for a while what their intentions were as to whether they wanted to keep that partnership going or not, and where it was successful and where it needed tweaking and all the rest of it. But the EFL are a very strong commercial organisation. They've got a really good infrastructure and great people there. So, they would never have been, kind of counting their chickens, so to speak, and not being mindful of the potential of needing to go to market. But I also think the Sky Bet agreement is so strong, and the relationship is clearly very strong, that they would have had a pretty good steer on whether that needed to happen, or whether it was highly likely that a partnership was going to be renewed. Throw into that though the white paper, which we were all waiting for. They will have had to have had their finger on the pulse of the sponsorship market, not knowing whether that decision was going to be taken out of Sky Bet and their hands.
George, really quickly, obviously we know the links between Sky Sports and Sky Bet aren't as strong as they were in terms of ownership, but do you think in a world where the EFL did agree a deal, let's say a deal with Viaplay or BT Sport was too good to turn down, do you think in that world the EFL still would have gone with Sky Bet a few months later as their principal partner, or do you think they would have looked elsewhere?
I think that the EFL will look. There's no doubt that there's a brand connection, obviously, whether that's in name only or there's more to it. We can speculate all we want on that, but I'm sure that the EFL would pretty consistently declare that the two processes are independent, and they need to be independent for competition reasons. So could it have influenced it? Would it have influenced it? Possibly. We don't know. I'd like to think not, because of the kind of governance that would surround an organisation like the EFL, and the governance there is very strong. But yeah, I think we just have to speculate on that one, Joe, to be truthful.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm. And you've already mentioned about kind of the white paper and the relationship with football. Do you think since the launch of the white paper that there's been hesitation from the EFL over agreeing this deal, off the back of it, obviously, and the decision of the Premier League to remove betting sponsorship from the front of the shirts? George, actually, I'll go with you on this one.
Yeah, I think I said this kind of recently again, but it's really easy to get into the mindset of the Premier League have decided to remove the betting sponsorships from the front of shirts, and when we really do have to clarify that the clubs are the stakeholders of the Premier League, and they elected to take that decision. It wasn't forced upon them by the Premier League, big bad powers that be and all the rest of it. The clubs collectively came together to take that decision. So that's the first point of clarity that I just wanted to make. But in terms of hesitation, I think when you start to take a look at the announcement that's come out, and you've kind of already mentioned in your intro the MOU that's been agreed on, and the statements from the EFL and Sky Bet about their cooperation with the government in how they're going to try and influence demonstrate best practice to influence the code of conduct, and how the partnership was referenced in the white paper document about partnership, how successful partnerships can be delivered. I think that would remove that hesitation. Naturally, the EFL are going to have to review their position, and so are Sky Bet, based on political pressures. But that partnership really is a leading partnership. There's obviously work that can be done to make it better and make it safer and all those other things. And this renewal agreement and the initiatives that have been announced as part of that renewal take steps toward delivering those changes. So, I think naturally there'll be hesitation because you don't know what's going to come from a white paper. But I'm pretty sure the EFL will have been engaged with the government at some level to influence that white paper, or to be part of key organisations surveyed for evidence as part of that white paper. And they would have been able to demonstrate, number one, the beneficial impact that the revenue that's brought in from Sky Bet, which I don't think they could have secured elsewhere, will have on football infrastructure, clubs, grassroots initiatives, just from the rights fee alone, not to mention the additional £6 million that's been committed in this deal by Sky Bet for community initiatives, on top of which there's another investment being made in educating players on the risks of gambling and the impact that can have on careers and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think all those things considered, that hesitation will have been mitigated. But yeah, I can't see how there wouldn't have been some sort of hesitancy, just because at one point it was the unknown.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And to sort of back up the numerous points you made there, I think the Premier League decision wouldn't have been a big or wouldn't have brought in a big obstacle for the Sky Bet and EFL, because when you think of what's the right word, these sort of maverick rogue betting partnerships between clubs, or it's more clubs but leagues or players and operators, the Sky Bet and EFL collaboration does not come to mind. It's one that's widely lauded as a good partnership, and the memorandum of understanding is the cherry on top of that, really. I think we've seen some really good focuses on social responsibility. I think it's one that's widely praised. And the other element that you're talking about there is the Premier League is a completely different entity from the EFL. I think as much as, we just discussed the Sky Sports broadcasting deal with the EFL, fantastic deal, incredibly lucrative. But in terms of the global power and the global broadcasting rights, the EFL simply doesn't generate that level of money that the Premier League does. I think Rick Parry, just a year prior to the Premier League taking the decision to remove front of shirt sponsors, stated that because of the lack of international television money, betting partnerships are really fundamental to the survival of EFL clubs. So yeah, I don't think it would have. There would have been discussions, of course, and there would have been a little bit of hesitancy, but I don't think it was ever really a real significant obstacle in re-signing this deal.
I think it would be interesting, hypothetically, to see if this white paper came out a lot stronger in terms of sports sponsorship. Because let's be honest, for the amount of time we was waiting for the white paper to drop, what we actually got was very weak and kind of more forward thinking. I think this provided DFL and Sky Bet that kind of gap where it's like, well, it's not too hard at the moment. So to do this deal again, we're not going to get a lot of backlash. But when it comes to renewing this deal, I feel the voice of betting sponsorships, and certainly in English football, will become a lot stronger. Not go to the roots of Spain and Italy with blanket bans, but I feel the voice of the people protesting against betting sponsorships in football will be a lot stronger. And I feel like getting these deals over the line in the future might become more of a hurdle for them to overcome. And I think because of just how weak the white paper was, that provided them the safety net to say, we can secure this partnership now and move forward with it. That's my personal opinion. Go on, George.
Yeah, I understand the sentiment on that, James. I get your sentiment on it and the thoughts. And maybe in 5 years' time, the landscape has shifted and it is a bit more conservative again. And like you said, it's stronger in terms of restrictions on gambling sponsorships. But I definitely don't think that the EFL would have taken the view that it was weak, therefore we'll sneak it in. Like, these negotiations would have been taking place for a very, very long time.
Yeah, that wouldn't be in the cycle.
Yeah, the sales cycle for them to secure a title partner at the level of investment that we're talking about is months and months and months in the making. So, I think they must have had signs from the government that, or through the collaboration with the government, and also they would have backed themselves that the partnership that they've been delivering with Sky Bet is a positive one, not just in terms of the level of investment that's coming into the game, but how that investment is being used, how it's being redistributed, the education messages that have already been pushed, which are now going to be built upon. And as Joe said, as betting partnerships go, it's probably one of the best in the world in terms of trying to be responsible and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, George, we speak a little on the broadcasting side of things there. There were a sea of broadcasters looking to partner with the EFL. I mean, you work on the inside a little bit, so you know better than us. The EFL would have had a queue of partners, right? Maybe not quite as lucrative as Sky Bet, but there would have been no short queue of partners for them to potentially get in as the principal partner if the Sky Bet deal had have fallen through or not been extended.
I wouldn't say there would be a queue. I think that's the sponsorship market at the moment is perhaps not as buoyant as it has been in previous years. I spoke to an agency this week and they described it as having a pulse but being unconscious in terms of the volume of deals that are being done. And that isn't just from the gambling industry perspective, because the gambling industry is usually quite buoyant, although it's less buoyant at the moment. That's just kind of across the board with other opportunities. And if you look at the moment at the types of clubs, the volume of clubs that are in market for shirt opportunities coming into this season across Europe, it is really significant. There's some very big teams that are still in market and have been in market in the build up to this season that have been struggling to secure the valuations that they want. And as we sit here today talking, there's still 2 Premier League teams that don't have shirt deals for next season. I think probably 1 or 2 in the Championship, a couple in League One. So, I think there's a misconception that the door gets knocked down for these sorts of opportunities. Like, yes, there'll be interest, but interest and desire, aligning that with, the capital to be able to do it, the ability to be able to activate it being the right fit from various different standpoints. That's why these things take such a long time to get done, and that's why the lead time on this would have been significant. And the best case scenario for pretty much any partnership is that it's been delivered well and it gets renewed and it gets uplifted and everyone continues to see the value in it. And I think that's where when we look at this deal in particular, it is that revenue uplift is symbiotic in terms of, like, Sky Bet have committed more revenue into the agreement. 50% uplift is what's been reported in the press release. But they know that investment is going into the game, and that investment into the game only improves the product, only improves audiences, only supports the Sky Sports numbers, only supports fan engagement, only supports, the opportunities for them to engage with punters and all the rest of it. So, yeah, and that's what's unique about this partnership. It genuinely is a partnership. It genuinely is something that, they're both trying to build English football and continue to grow English football, which is fantastic. But I'd like to believe that there was a long queue. I'm sure there were active discussions. I just don't think it was. I don't think it would be, people clamoring for it though, just because of how the sponsorship market is at the moment.
Yeah, and in your answer there, George, you actually mentioned there's a few clubs that don't have sponsorship agreements for next year, but there is one club in the Premier League who have extended their collaboration and that's Newcastle, who've extended it with Fun 88. Joel, come to you on this one because it's quite an interesting deal for quite a few reasons. Can you just explain about this deal for us?
It is a fascinating deal. Obviously, it's worth noting that they've moved from the front of shirt. They're now a regional betting partner for Newcastle. But obviously, Newcastle are not the same club. They're not the same marketing force they were last year. They have grown significantly. They're in the Champions League, and they're a real force now. It's a fascinating deal though, because it shows that the PIF, the Public Investment Fund, or the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, are willing to do deals like this. And also I think George gave me the insight earlier in the week of how there's a lot of loyalty involved in this deal as well. I think that was fascinating.
Mm-hmm. And the reason, the good thing about bringing up Newcastle right now is because the sporting world certainly the golfing world have had quite a major shake-up, with League Golf and the PGA Tour merging to become one entity. And it links with the Saudi Arabian audience of Newcastle. George, I kind of want to come to you in this one because I think it might be an interesting debate and something we can dive into a bit further down the line when this news is, people have had time to digest this news. But when you've got 2 different entities like a Live Golf, who are Saudi-backed, and you've got your PGA Tour, when 2 of them come together, and there's conflicting issues, may that be morale issues, religious issues, ethnic issues, or so forth. How is it in terms of sponsorships when it comes to actually agreeing to the original agreements that you had? So if you were a PGA Tour sponsor and you didn't agree with, I don't know, some ethical issues in terms of what happens in Saudi Arabia, sponsorship-wise, how did they handle that? Do they have to agree to the original deal, or can they move away?
Yeah, no, I think it's a tough one, right? Like, I'm sure that there will be, as part of the merger and as part of the, a lot of these sponsorship agreements will have change of ownership clauses. So, I'm sure that will be reflected at some level throughout the PGA sponsorship agreements. If there's a change of ownership of the league, then the sponsors have the right to terminate, and that may go the other way as well. That if a sponsor has a change of ownership, then the league has the right to terminate. It's usually a right to terminate if the rights holder has a change of ownership. But I think there's a lot to unpick here and to unpack, and I think in truth, it's going to be a matter of time will tell. I think there's a few different things. I think if you're aligned with golf because your audience is golf and you massively over-index in terms of demographic overlap with golf, then you're probably going to want to stay with golf. If that isn't the reason, and it's other, there's other reasons that you're aligned with it, but actually you could go to tennis or you could go to something else which is similar, then maybe we'll see sponsors jump ship depending on how it all shakes out. But I think it's still so fresh, it's still so new. I think if you just Google search it for a matter of minutes, you'll find so many different conflicting accounts of how people feel about this deal. The same across social media platforms as well. And I think at the moment, a lot of the sponsors will just be taking stock. The other thing you have to consider is, how do those sponsors integrate with one another? How do you merge ultimately three different organizations into one? And are there conflicts across different categories? And how do you go through a process of unpicking that? And also, if you're merging the three, does that mean that it's now a super entity and actually the rights valuations for the new entity that's been created are higher because they believe there's going to be bigger audiences, bigger prize money, bigger ambitions, and therefore bigger rights fees? There's a whole piece where the reset button really is going to have to be pressed, or at least the pause button initially, with a view to resetting that partner program. But yeah, they've got a journey to go on. I think it's the big thing.
Will that have been vice versa, George, with to sort of bring it back to Newcastle, actually? Obviously, they will have long-standing partnerships before the Saudis came in. And then the Saudis might see better value in the club now and more. They might be able to get better sponsorships. Well, they have a change of ownership clause where they can sort of end old sponsorships from the Mike Ashley era early and bring in their own partners.
Yeah, there usually is. And certainly if I've worked at clubs before where we knew that a change of ownership was going to be taking place at some point. We knew the club was up for sale. And therefore, and we declared that as part of, entry point into the process. And therefore, the club wanted to insert those clauses because the club wanted to be in a position where if it wanted to walk away because a certain ownership group came in, whether it was Saudi Arabia or Chinese or wherever, that didn't agree with gambling advertising or alcohol or whatever it might be, doesn't really matter. Then they had that choice to do so. So yeah, as it happens, I think Fun 88 were in the last year of their agreement. They had a very good relationship and have had a good relationship. You'd expect them to have a good relationship over a 6-year period as front of shirt partner. But it was clearly been decided that, gambling sponsorships are going to be something that the club continues to have on board as part of their partner program. And Fun 88 are the first partner of this new era in the Asian betting designation. And, it wouldn't shock me if we saw one or two more partners come on for different geographic regions, whether it's a European partner or a Latin America partner or something like that. I think we'll see at least another one, maybe two partners come on board with the club. I'd anticipate.
Perfect. And sadly, that's all we've got time for. George and Joe, I could pick your brains on sports sponsorship for way longer than we've actually got. So hopefully with this Live and PGA Tour developments going on, we could have you both back. Hopefully, something interesting might come out of this that we can talk a bit further into. But for now, I'd just like to thank you both for joining me. To the listeners out there, everything that we've talked about, I'll insert a link to insidersport.com where you can click and find out a bit more on the stories, if that be Live Golf, PGA Tour, or Sky Bet that we was talking about during the show. Again, Joe, George, thank you. To our listeners, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with the Canadian Gaming Summit, being held at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre on the 13th to the 15th of June. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.